don't have to read the book. There are a lot of books to read.
Would you like a piece of cake? Marvin, pass it around.
Okay, now, it is an anthology, but often a collection like that draws from different places and different times. All of these chapters were written purposefully, except for 3 out of 18. They were written purposely for this book, Community Resilience Reader. And it's through the Post-Carbon Institute. Y'all remember Richard Heinberg? I bet you do. Remember the big book, the big energy book? He's the guy who always promotes renewables, though there are many of us who might think if we did renewables along with nuclear, we might make it, but we can do that as a bone of contention a little bit later, because I'd like to get some ideas. No arguments. It might just be simpler to say yay or nay, you know. We wouldn't get into an argument. But most of us are on the same page. I've heard everybody talk at one time or another, and I know that pretty much politically we kind of think the same way, and I'm not going to go there, just at any rate. So, this book, one of the dedications is to another couple of books that we did. And the reason I wanted to do this book is that I'm really sad we are not having a transition group here in Fayetteville. And I'm attempting to get my little out in the mountain community to get together as if they're already together because they have Headwaters Alternative School. But I'm not sure that they're aware of the dire straits we're in relative to climate change and all the causes and the politics and so forth like that. So anyway, the book that we're doing today is dedicated to Rob Hopkins, who started the transitions movement in UK in around 2006. And it has to do, as you can see, making your community more resilient in uncertain times. That's one of his books. And this was the first one, From Oil Dependency to Local Resilience. So what you're going to hear...
We discussed
those.
I'm not sure both of those or one of them.
I know we discussed...
I've got both of them.
Okay, yeah. But I wanted you to remember, because this is similar, but much more detailed, very dense, and I would say it's more, in some ways it's more academic. But I tend to look at things that way. So y'all decide when we're through. It's divided into 3 sections. I'll get to that in a minute because I wanted to make a mention about, you can look up here, the writers of the Community Resilience Reader are from universities, nonprofits, policy institutes, specialists on the economy, energy, environment, equality, bioregionalists, scientists, systems thinkers, and more. And so some of all of those categories are writers and are thoughts that will come into this. And that's part of what makes this so detailed, so dense, and somewhat academic. So, let's see. They were asked to write about whatever they consider the most important from their field of expertise relative to community resilience. Now let me read you this little quote. It's on page 5, if anybody wants to look at it from the book. You won't have it marked up like I do. Here are some of the underlying assumptions we build upon throughout this book. And it's kind of good to hear this as an outline before we start going through it, because it really helps you pinpoint, oh yeah, there's that, and so forth. So the approaches to see what you think is the E4 crisis. What do you think is the E4 crisis? 3 E's.
Energy efficiency.
Not quite, you're getting close. Energy for sure, economy for sure, environment for sure, equity. Those 4, they're big, that's it. They're all interconnected. Approaches to the E4 crisis must be grounded in critical thinking, sober expectations, and acceptance of geophysical realities. I repeat, geophysical realities. Systems literacy, or thinking, is essential for understanding our systemic, multi-scalar, complex challenges and for developing effective responses. Systems thinking. And we'll get into that in a little more detail so you'll understand what is meant by systems thinking.
Yeah.
Sustainability and resilience are distinct but complementary concepts. One of the quotes is, sustainability prioritizes outcomes resilience prioritizes process. Now, that may not stick in your brain right now, it certainly didn't mine until I got into the middle of the book that talked about that specifically. Building resilience, this is our fourth point so far. Building resilience means intentionally guiding a system's process of adaptation so as to preserve some qualities and allow others to fade away, all the while retaining the essence or identity of the system. Remember, community, identity. What is your value as a community? So identity becomes really, really important. Identity is essentially determined by what people value about where they live. The people who inhabit a community must be at the heart of the resilience building process. And then the last point, these are assumptions, as he calls them. Communities are at the ideal level of focus for building resilience because a particular power is held at the state and local government levels in the U.S. Make this kind of work possible, and because regular people can most effectively be involved at this level. And see, we're representative of exactly what they're talking about here. And as we go through this, especially in the third component, where we're seeing exactly what are examples of resilience in communities, I'm hoping all of you all will have super examples of what's happening either at Fayetteville or at University of Arkansas. So we're not there yet. So that's a starting point right there. Okay, so the three sections. The first one, excuse me, I'm gonna have to drink some water. For part one, it's our predicament. In other words, it's about the 4 E's that we just said. And he's gonna describe them in some detail, and there are some thoughts that we may not have thought about all together. You know, we thought about it here, we thought about it there, but they pull it together in a really good way. And I'm hoping you just ask some quick questions and then do the detail, because I think you all know a lot of what the predicament is and the drivers. And then part two, the format will be a little more detailed with quite a bit of definitions, because it talks about, it talks about systems literacy or systems thinking. In other words, what actually is it?
No, it's just my hand there.
And then it gives real good definitions that we can apply to real world of what is resilience and what is sustainability, because they're slightly different, but they work together for the whole. Now, let me move this down a little bit. I had more than I need, so I'm going to skip that first part right there, and I'll go on to this part. Now we'll go to the beginning and introduction to chapter 1. Let's see. You've got one of the questionnaires in front of you. Mm-hmm. That first question is name as many issues as you can think of relative to the 4 E's: environment, energy, the economy, and equity. Let's start with environment. Just go around the room and name one environmental problem that you know of. Malcolm, only one. Malcolm has 3,000 at his fingertips, but he can only tell us one.
Loss of biological diversity.
Thank you, great. Dick, one.
Innovations in occupational and occupation destruction of ecologies around the world.
Oh my gosh. Do you have one?
Well, my concern is about fracking, using up the precious water supply.
Good. Water. What you got?
I always think of an overpopulated world.
Okay, all right.
Kind of along those lines related to equity, the big disparity between the richest and the poorest.
Right. Well, that'll come actually under equity, but still, they are all interconnected, they're all interlocking, and it's cumulative, and if one changes, another changes like that. Shelley, you got one?
I'm surprised. I think everyone would say this, pollution.
Oh, yeah. Our only
Also
one.
the obvious one, global warming. Hasn't been mentioned yet, except pollution.
What do you know? Gladys, you got one?
Industrial agriculture.
Oh, boy. That's one of my saddest places.
That was going to be mine.
They're both very connected to that.
Yes.
What happens with industrial agriculture?
Well, running of the rivers and lakes and the oceans and the,
There you go. Soil erosion, all the erosion, and crap that goes down to dead zones and stuff like that. Okay, well, if y'all haven't been able to name thousands of them, on page 3, let me just take a look real quick and see if there's something else. Ecosystems being pushed near or past their limits, topsoil loss, freshwater depletion, biodiversity, climate change being felt worldwide, industrial society remains overwhelmingly dependent on fossil fuels, ever more destructive, expensive resource extraction, economies are structured to require constant growth, but fossil fuels going beyond biophysical limits of the planet, broken promises for globalization have helped create, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. Strengthening the stability of communities everywhere, including the United States. Economic globalization and corporation-friendly government policies have left citizens and towns across the country bereft of decent working-class jobs and civic vitality. Decades of growth-oriented planning and underinvestment have left virtually every city and town with an unsurmountable backlog of infrastructure and maintenance replacement. On and on. I mean, we named, that was great, you guys, thank you for the naming. Now, the book is based on one other item. One other, like the 4 E's. If you have a book and you want to look from pages 17 through 36, and I'm just going to name topics, just quickly name topics. These are what they're calling, they're identified as the 6 foundations essential in considering resilience building in a community. So listen for them, and we'll be able to chart them as we go to the text again. Okay, people is the first foundation. The power to envision the future of the community and build its resilience resides with community members. Foundation 2. Systems thinking is essential for understanding the complex, interrelated crises now unfold and what they mean for us similarly complex communities. Let's see what number 3 is going to be. You may already guess some of these. Foundation number 3, adaptability. A community that adapts to change is resilient, but because communities and the challenges we face are dynamic, adaptation is an ongoing process. Okay, here's foundation number 4, transformability. Some challenges are so big that it's not possible for the community to simply adapt. Fundamental transformative changes may be necessary. And then foundation 5, sustainability, there's one more after this. Community resilience is not sustainable if it serves only us and only now. It needs to work for other communities, future generations, and the ecosystems on which we all depend. There's so much good information in here, but the last one, 6, is courage. And you know, I don't think we think about that. But there's 2 of my favorite chapters in here, because so much of the stuff we already kind of know. One of them is, why is it that we've come to this? And the person who writes about it says, we as human beings, are we going to be able to do this? Well, that's a fascinating chapter, we'll get there. But courage in the face of era of upheaval, or as some say, turbulent times. Anyway, as individuals and as a community, we need courage to confront challenging issues and take responsibility for our collective
There's
future.
a very important single one example of the courage thing, and that's the fear of speaking in public. Most people, it's their top fear, above dying. Really, polls show this.
Yeah, I've heard that.
People are terrified of speaking in public, and we need to get over that, because there are a lot of good people that just need to be, despite the terror, you gotta stand up in city council or wherever it is, and you gotta express some of these ideas.
It's like Shirley suggested not long ago to do a community outreach through the libraries. And we haven't been able to get it together yet. I was going to try to take it on, and I was just overwhelmed. And I'd really love to do that. And you suggested maybe some folks in CCL who want to get some practice.
There might be some young
You
people
know,
who would like to make
practice
presentations.
speaking. And then we can choose a book, like that one that Joe Romm, the Joe Romm book is really good. What everybody needs to know about climate change, something along those lines. So my wish for us is something to do with transitions, having a community of transitioners, so that we know how to scale it down, as we'll see here. And then this outreach, the courage to speak, the outreach might lead us to transition groups.
I'd like to suggest one other thing. Maybe it was mentioned in the first things you said, but I didn't hold one thought in my head that long, so. And that is that we all tend to believe what we think.
Oh, we're gonna go there, you don't have to even talk about it, there's a perfect chapter on that.
Great.
Perfect chapter on that.
Okay.
Can humans do it? And it has to do with, what are
We
you talking
need
about?
to recognize a way to find common ground in examining our thoughts as assumptions.
Perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there, that's a
I'm
great
glad that's
one.
in there.
It is, it definitely is. Okay, let's see. Okay, now that you've heard the 6 foundations, let's go right into understanding our predicament. And now we're gonna drill down a little bit. On
What
each
page
of
are
the
you on?
I'm on starting on page 45, it's chapter 2. And so this is the environmental crisis. Let me get to that page myself. I skipped through the book pretty fast as we're going along and like to read some quotes. Earth as a system, interconnected with social and economic systems, has maintained its relative stability for the last 11,000 years. And I hear that different, 11,000, 12,200, you know, it's still within that time frame, the Holocene.
The Holocene.
And now we know Anthropocene or Anthropocene. Now we're pushed beyond Earth's limits. Let's see in what way they've collected the different types of limits. Let me find that page 53. Here I'm on page 53. These are global socioeconomic trends. And in every graph, it's like this until suddenly now it goes up like this,
Yeah.
the hockey stick.
Yeah.
And here are just a few. Population, real GDP, urban population, primary energy use, large dams, water use, transportation, telecommunications, there are more, but I'm just gonna name a few to kind of lock it in. Now here's Earth system trends, all of them the same thing. Either a hockey stick like that or jagged like that and then goes up. High carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, stratospheric ozone, surface temperature, marine fish capture, tropical forest loss. So I thought I might ask how familiar we all are with the 9 planetary boundaries. Can we, and that's actually, though, there's a list, a picture of it.
It's
This
most
pie
of those
graph,
things you just read,
it's this
yeah.
pie graph, but there's a better understanding of it if anybody wants to look on page 156.
That's one I wish you had a PowerPoint for. If we just had the nine
diagrams,
planetary
nice.
boundaries.
Okay, well anyway, here, on this page, 156, here are the actual 9 interdependent areas of the, they define the 9 interdependent areas of the global commons. Climate change, biodiversity loss, excess nitrogen and phosphorus production, stratospheric ozone depletion, ocean acidification, freshwater consumption, land use change, air pollution, and chemical pollution. Which 3 have we passed the thresholds?
Carbon dioxide for one,
Uh,
sure.
Well,
All but 3 of them?
there's 3 that we've passed, and they name them as,
Okay.
the researchers found that humanity has already exceeded the safe boundaries for the first 3. Climate change, which there you go, CO2. Climate change, biodiversity loss, and nitrogen production. So just going within their names, those are the 3 that they say.
Biodiversity loss, that'd be like extinction.
Right, we did a study not too long ago by Colbert, the 6th extinction, and it was animal. In that case, it was animal extinction. One of my, you know, some of y'all, if you've read my emails, have heard me talk about disaster porn. And I just read this stuff all the time, and it just, you know, it does get to be more than I thought it was. Well, you're getting a course on it, that's right. So, oh, I don't remember where I was going with that. Just you're a little humor in that disaster porn. So, let's see, moving right along. Cascading impact.
Haven't we already passed that?
What's that? Oh, near-term extinction, that's what I wanted to say. We seem to not want to actually talk about the possibility of near-term extinction. That's not the same thing as the 6th grade extinction and animal loss. That's us. That's the loss of civilization. That's like nuclear winter or, you know, the catastrophe that we're going toward if we don't stop. And we don't want to talk about that. And that's going to come up in the chapter that Shelley, you have referred to now. about assumptions and how people think and so forth like that. At any rate, I read that sort of stuff, and it's not a pretty picture at all. So at any rate, I talk about the 9 planetary boundaries, cascading impacts, pressures that are cumulative and interactive. In 2015, after 21 years of effort, finally there was a Paris Agreement, and the US has pulled out. You know, we all know this. So many of us think that environmentalism, as it's been called, is a failure. So we're gonna have to think again, you know, what do we actually gonna do? Okay, so now, here's, let's go to the next section. It's the energy crisis. Dick, that's on page 65, if you wanna get into your book that way, and it shows all of us that we're moving all along here. Out of 300 pages, we're already on 65, so that's a good thing. Okay, energy crisis, from fossil fuel abundance to renewable constraints. Now remember, the Post-Carbon Institute, Richard Kleinberg, they're very much renewable energy. So they're not going to say so much about nuclear or other types of things that we might want to discuss today. At any rate, to renewable constraints. Energy enables us to do everything. Expansion of energy has allowed this economic expansion, which is unprecedented in human history. But there's a steady decline in thermodynamic efficiency. The EROI, or energy return from energy invested, and global oil, as we know, are in turmoil. Challenges are both climate change and energy depletion. But market forces are not sufficient to drive investments at sufficient rates to enable non-disruptive energy
It's
transition.
because we don't have the prices right.
Yeah, there's a great
It's only because of that.
definition in here of capitalism, and we will go to that shortly. Okay, so here's our current energy. And Dick, that's in pages 68 to 72, and I'm gonna go through it kind of quick. But we know most of this, but let's just hear it again. Petroleum accounts for 95% of current transport energy, and the entire economy depends on motorized transportation. Thus, any problems with maintaining the oil industry would have system-wide impacts until full-scale replacements for oil and its services are ready. That's a big deal right there, the until. Coal provides, this is a 2017 book, so this is right up to date, this is right now. I like it that way. Coal provides 29% of total energy, 70% of U.S. energy, 17 of U.S., with 39% of world electricity deriving from coal combustion, 38% U.S. It's the most carbon intensive of fossil fuels. And I'm going to skip, we know a lot of the pros and cons of that. Natural gas provides 24% of world energy, 22% of primary energy for world electricity generation. In the U.S., the percentages are 31 of total and 24 of electricity. Recent assessments of the extent impacts of methane leakage from production operations suggest that overall, natural gas may be as harmful to the climate as coal, however. Nuclear
That's
power.
realistic. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. Y'all speak up, you know, I'll cut us off if we've got to keep moving, because I know I've got a whole bunch of
That's a
stuff.
very good deal.
Feel free to
If
speak up.
If natural gas is that bad, that's a very big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Well, we've all-
That's a transition fuel.
Yeah, but not everybody believes it's a bridge. A lot of us are saying, no, but what are we gonna do? You know, it's the same way with nuclear. Are we gonna use, well, here we're getting into nuclear is the very next one, so let's keep moving. Nuclear power produces electricity via 447 commercial reactors currently operating worldwide. There are 99 in the US. Collectively, they produce about 4%, not much, of world energy and 12% of world electricity. 8% of all energy consumed in the US and 19% of US electricity. Uranium, the fuel for the nuclear cycle, is a depleting non-renewable resource. And the peak of world uranium production may well occur by 2030. There's more on the pros and cons of nuclear, and I happen to be interested in that, because there's some of us who are talking about maybe that's a bridge fuel. So,
Well, we could use, the new reactors would be using tritium.
let's look at question
The
number
peak of
3.
uranium doesn't mean.
Well, there's thorium reactors. Y'all need to comment on
Many other
thorium. Yeah,
ways
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
nuclear power.
So what are the question number 3 here is what are the pros and cons? and we're not getting into an argument, we're just saying pros and cons, okay? What are pros and cons of nuclear? Because I know there's a big holdover from the 1970s, and I think it's a conspiracy theory. I think the oil and gas people got in there and made us afraid of nuclear when they didn't have to. Now, there's plenty to be afraid of. There's plutonium for bombs, there's how do we put it underground, or what are we gonna do with it? Can we shoot it into the sun? How do we get rid of it? Or, and then there's cost overruns, there's a building that never seems to stop, it never gets online, and so forth and so on. But then there are things such as, I work with some nuclear scientists in New Mexico, where the big guys are. And it's only because we go to a nuclear science history museum that I get to talk to people who are still within the industry, maybe as consultants, maybe they've retired and so forth. So they talk about small modular reactors that don't have cost overruns, that use their own fuel over and over again. So and there's no plutonium. So they're just, and they're small, so they're replicable. So there's so many different ways to look at it. And then Malcolm, thorium? You want to say a few things about that?
Well, thorium is a lot more abundant than as fast than uranium. And the United States had a working thorium reactor. But because we wanted to power nuclear submarines, and thorium wasn't particularly well suited to that, we went to uranium. It's, I mean, if we're gonna make the transition to no fossil fuel use, we're gonna have to go nuclear.
Now, I'm gonna stop you there. Here's my deal. Are we gonna be able to have what they call a just transition, which would be ta-da, or are we gonna go into chaos? And that's the reason that, personally, I think I will have to support nuclear, and we're shutting them down. But I don't know enough about it. I just don't know enough about it. So we don't need to go any further than that unless you've got something real fervent you wanna say.
China's not shutting them down, for better or worse, whatever.